In consequentialist ethics, the ends do justify the means. So consequentialism, the ends justify the means. Moral weight is shifted from character and intent to how much good our decisions might produce. So we're moving away from character, intent, broader universal principles to thinking about how much good our decisions might produce. So whether an act is morally or ethically justified depends on the results of that act. So what is the outcome, and does the outcome justify our behavior? Consequentialism is a form of utilitarianism. Utilitarianism, in its simplest form, can be defined as providing the greatest benefit for the greatest number of people. So utilitarianism is about the greatest benefit, providing the greatest benefit for the greatest number of people. A central question here is whether we emphasize the significance of the benefit or how many people will be advantaged or disadvantaged. So we've got to balance the greatest, or our understanding or definition of greatest here. Do we emphasize the significance of the benefit, or do we emphasize how many people will be advantaged or disadvantaged in any particular circumstance? And this can become a very complicated question, a really, really complicated question. To give you an example, and this was an example that I've used, time and time again over the past few years. At QUT, it doesn't necessarily apply anymore because your extensions for assignments are handled centrally. So just assume for the purposes of this example that I'm responsible for granting extensions. And once upon a time, I was for all lecturers were, unit coordinators were for their individual units. So just assume that that's the case. I'm the unit coordinator of CCB 101 and a student approaches me for an extension on an assignment because they are going on holiday. Do I grant the extension using consequentialism or utilitarianism as my guiding principle? Do I grant that extension? The answer is no. The answer is no. And the reason why is that in order to give that one person an advantage, I am disadvantaging everyone else in the class. And if you want to think about it in real terms, there are about 250 students enrolled in CCB 101. So if I was to give one student an extension for going on holiday, then I would be disadvantaging 249 other students. We should promote, under consequentialist ethics, things, behaviours, actions that benefit society as a whole, rather than focusing on how individuals or groups of people might benefit. For example, punishing a criminal causes pain. Obviously, the person is sent to jail, they're fined, a whole range of things. Now, it does not only cause pain for that individual person, but it might cause pain for their family, their friends, relatives, a broader group of people. However, consequentialist ethics, utilitarianism argues that causing the criminal pain as punishment for their action and the subsequent pain that other people around that person might be caused is better than a world without justice, because that would ultimately cause more people more pain. If we had a world where there were no rules, there were no consequences, obviously we'd be able to run around and do whatever we want, and that would result in a whole heap of pain for a large number of people. So that's consequentialism in action. The ends do justify the means. The key dilemma in consequentialist ethics is a really it's a difficult one. It's a difficult one, particularly when it applies to media. And we're going to look at, in other parts of this module, examples where the ends didn't justify the means in quite tragic circumstances. The scenario that I want to get you to respond to as part of this section of the module addresses that, as does later in the module our discussion of the Princess Kate prank call in 2012, which resulted in very tragic circumstances. The suicide of a nurse that was involved in that prank call. It becomes a really difficult area because while we cannot be held accountable for simply failing to foresee all the possible consequences of our actions, we can be held accountable for our intended consequences and failing to observe likely or foreseeable outcomes. Now, the problem here is, particularly when the actions of a media professional result in extremely tragic consequences, how do we determine what is likely or what is foreseeable? 2020 hindsight, particularly in response to a tragedy, is a very powerful thing. But what counts as a likely or foreseeable outcome in our actions? And do certain actions set precedents for future actions? In other words, in the case of the Princess Kate prank call, where someone committed suicide, does that person's death then set a precedent for all FM radio prank calls in the future? So this is a really complicated set of decisions for media professionals, and something we need to think very carefully about.